Are there still any red lines for the United States after the start of the Kursk operation? Who is preventing Ukraine from completely defeating Putin? And are there secret negotiations between Washington and Moscow now? Let's talk about this right now with our guest Boris Pincus, public figure and president of the Ronald Reagan Republican Club. Boris Yakovlevich is in touch with us. Hello, I am glad to welcome you.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Glad to be on your channel. Glory to Ukraine.
Glory to the heroes. The offensive of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region has been successfully continuing for the third week. This is on the territory of the Russian Federation. Putin is already thinking about mobilization and how to convince Russians that this is now the new normal. Boris Yakovlevich, what do they think about this in the United States of America, and do they think at all?
Our election battles are gaining momentum, and so much so that the appearance of Harris in the political firmament, as the main candidate from the Democratic Party, of course, influenced the intensity of the struggle between the two parties, and influenced so much that Harris began to score points, leveled off in a number of states where the Democratic Party was losing.
Харрис стала набирать очки, выровнялась в ряде штатов, где Демпартия проигрывала.
Moreover, it even began to prevail in the swing states, albeit insignificantly. This, of course, worries us all. There is not just a struggle between leaders or between parties, there is a struggle between two Americas. And this struggle is inextricably linked to the two wars that are taking place today. One is in the center of Europe, and the second is in the Middle East. And if earlier the average person had international problems related, for example, even to the national interests of our country, were far from being in the first place in the choice of this or that candidate. Today the war in Ukraine and Israel's war against terrorists are already on the agenda of our voters.
Война в Украине и война Израиля против террористов.
This is already becoming so real that it is impossible today to exclude these two huge problems, the wars in Ukraine and the Middle East that I mentioned above, affecting each of us, taxpayers, so to say that despite the fact that we are fighting with varying success in favor of one or another candidate from the Democratic Republican Party, we cannot ignore the following: what is happening today in Ukraine.
Говорить о том, что несмотря на то, что у нас борьба идет с переменным успехом в пользу того или иного кандидата от Демократической республиканской партии, мы не можем игнорировать вот то, что происходит сегодня в Украине.
Plus, Ukraine today simply stunned the entire world community with its heroic act, attacking Russian troops on its territory, seizing more than 45,000 square kilometers from Russia and threatening today the city of Kursk itself and even the Kursk nuclear power plant.
Захватив более 45 тысяч квадратных километров у России и угрожая сегодня самому городу Курску и даже Курской атомной электростанции.
This is quite serious. And now we have a question in the elite: what to do? How to react to this? After all, until now, Biden had a routine phrase, which, in fact, was his strategy, to provide assistance to Ukraine so much as to avoid a clash between America and Russia, motivating that these are two nuclear powers, not to provoke a new thermonuclear war between the West and Russia, for example.
Мотивируя тем, что это две ядерные державы, не спровоцировать новую термоядерную войну между Западом и Россией, к примеру.
And this, unfortunately, is still taking place. Suffice it to say that against the backdrop of the discussions that are taking place today in the platforms of the two candidates, for example, Harris on the one hand and Trump on the other hand, they are necessarily addressed to both of them their attitude to the war in Ukraine, to assistance to Ukraine, especially now, when Russian troops are advancing, albeit slowly, in the Donetsk direction, capturing one settlement after another, and on the other hand, the armed forces of Ukraine made a splash by advancing into the territory of Russia in the Kursk direction.
Захватывая один населенный пункт за другим, а с другой стороны ВСУ произвела фурор, продвинувшись на территории России в Курском направлении.
Moreover, today there are already outlines that the armed forces of Ukraine are beginning to advance in 5 directions on the territory of the Kursk region. This is very interesting, and to the point that today the CMS is already becoming a natural border separating the territory of the occupied armed forces of Ukraine and the territory of Russia, from where attacks can be carried out. Thus, the armed forces of Ukraine today are sending a message, first of all to us, the Americans, showing that the armed forces of Ukraine know how to defend themselves, they know how to achieve what was scary to even imagine yesterday. And this suggests that we are obliged to help Ukraine with the types of weapons that Ukraine asks for, putting aside these Biden's reservations, not to provoke, not to escalate. I return to the beginning of our conversation. There are no red lines today, my friends. Where are Putin's promised threats to use nuclear weapons? Today, the armed forces of Ukraine are already on the territory of Russia itself. Therefore, it is necessary to bring the matter to an end. And what is the end? Elementary. Give Ukraine modern types of weapons so that Ukraine can, the armed forces of Ukraine can stop the offensive of Russian troops in the Donetsk direction, 1. And secondly, do not tie the hands of the armed forces of Ukraine in attacks on the Kerch Bridge, because the Kerch Bridge, the Crimean Bridge, is the oxygen vein that feeds the Russian Navy and ground forces on the Crimean Peninsula.
Boris Yakovlevich, I apologize, but why is someone tying their hands about the strikes on the Crimean Bridge? After all, the United States has always said that Crimea is Ukrainian territory, you can do whatever you want there. But on the territory of the Russian Federation, it was like an escalation for them.
The question is correct. Unfortunately, the armed forces of Ukraine have not yet been given permission to use long-range ATACMS in attacks on the Crimean Bridge. This is not allowed to this day. And the attacks that the armed forces of Ukraine are carrying out today, with their drones, they are low-powered, although numerous, and it is no coincidence that Russian troops have so far managed to repel them. And even if some single successful case for Ukraine manages to attack the Crimean Bridge, they are not significant. They do not lead to what a powerful attack on the Crimean Bridge should have led to in order to destroy this bridge to the last brick, so that there is no talk of its restoration. And this is possible only with the most powerful modern shells, missiles, long-range ATACMS, so that it would be possible, being at a distance of 1,500 kilometers, to attack this Crimean Bridge, and not with one salvo, but with several. It is no coincidence that today there is information that Russian troops are already conducting some parallel systems, installing some kind of poles, today they are installing in parallel with this Crimean Bridge, providing for the possibility of attacks on the Crimean Bridge so that it would be possible, for example, to have some kind of backup way to provide the Russian troops located on the territory of Crimea from the mainland of Russia with the necessary weapons and even manpower.
значит, российских войск, находящихся на территории Крыма, с материковой части России, необходимым вооружением и живой силой даже.
Therefore, all this today suggests that if we really want to help Ukraine in its victory, there should be no restrictions.
Помочь Украине в ее победе, никаких ограничений не должно быть.
Therefore, unfortunately, this fear, lack of will, lack of foresight in the leadership of the administration, unfortunately, leads to the fact that the Ukrainian people continue to lose their soldiers and civilians, unfortunately.
Украинский народ продолжает терять своих солдат и мирных граждан, к сожалению.
Although we have every reason to help Ukraine with the types of weapons it needs, there is money for this. Thank God, the law on assistance to Ukraine was adopted on April 20th. 4 months have passed, and to this day the necessary types of weapons are not available in the required quantity. It's not just about long-range ATACMS, it's also about Patriot systems, which should have been in Ukraine for a long time. And then we would be more calm about ensuring the security of Kyiv, Odessa, Dnipro, for example, Kharkiv and other cities of Ukraine on the one hand, and also F-16 aircraft. Why are there only 10 of them? Why should there be 100 or 200 of them? Moreover, I am pleased to note to you the well-known expression of Senator Lindsey Graham. When he visited Kyiv, he loudly said that he would very much like our American veterans, who are fluent in F-16 aircraft, to take part in helping the armed forces of Ukraine as volunteers.
Как добровольцы приняли бы участие в оказании помощи ВСУ.
And he expressed this when he was in Kyiv, and when he came to us, Washington, he, for example, voiced it in various committees of the Senate and then contacted Mike Johnson, our Speaker of the lower house, and asked him to quickly scroll through a number of committees of the lower house of this issue and to legalize the right of American volunteers to take part in helping Ukraine fill the shortage of pilots, who could perfectly use F-16 aircraft on the fronts of Ukraine.
Право добровольцев американцев принять участие в оказании помощи Украине в восполнении нехватки летчиков, которые могли бы прекраснейшим образом пользоваться самолетами F-16 на фронтах Украины.
And I'll tell you, we have at least 100 of them, at least ready to go. Who are veterans? These are those who went through the war in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And veterans are not called those who are over 70 years old. These are those who have served in the ranks of the American Army, and at the age of 35 to 50, they are also considered veterans. Healthy, strong guys, they would gladly take part. But we need legislation that would allow him to do this. Why is it possible for Putin to have volunteers from more than 20 countries of the world, and moreover, to have so-called volunteers in the form of Wagner mercenaries and so on, scattered around the world, engaged in terror, and why is the West embarrassed to do this? Why? There is a war going on, and war should be like war. Ukraine has never asked for a soldier. Ukraine has never asked a soldier of Western countries to set foot on the territory of Ukraine. From the first day of the war, Zelensky is against only weapons, period. And this is not in full, unfortunately, to this day.
This is a great proposal from Graham, and I want it to really come true. And we see that Russian propagandists are reacting very violently to it, because they expect that if this is already being discussed in Ukraine, then in the United States, then there may soon be a positive decision. But our president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, said that Putin's zero reaction to the events in the Kursk region proves that there is no reason not to give us permission to hit Russia with long-range weapons. Boris Yakovlevich, who does this decision depend on now? From Biden? We understand that in the United States of America, it is possible that Ukraine is not up to the moment, But if we still talk about the events that are taking place right now, then who should now say and make this proposal or pass laws to give Ukraine such permission?
Сейчас сказать о том и сделать это предложение или там законы принять, чтобы дать Украине такое разрешение.
First, the law has been passed. The law was passed thanks to the Republicans, on April 20th, I will remind you, when it was about allocating $61 billion to Ukraine, I will remind you, there is a paragraph in the legislation that clearly states assistance to Ukraine in the allocation of long-range ATACMS. To be honest, this is the prerogative, of course, of the executive branch. But the very fact that the legislation provides for a paragraph that clearly indicates specifically that there must be long-range ATACMS speaks volumes. If earlier Biden blamed everything on the Republicans, they did not agree to the supply of weapons to Ukraine for 6 months. Look at what it led to. Although this is, in fact, the question was different, absolutely. You see, the Democrats would have to approach it in such a way that it would be possible to simultaneously satisfy the residents of our southern states, who are victims of this tsunami, a wave of illegal emigration, and at the same time provide assistance to Ukraine. This could have been done, of course, but it was not done thanks to the Democrats. I think so, you see, and let's forget about these 6 months. Let's return again to the law adopted on April 20th. The law has been passed, the money has been allocated, my friends. 61 billion is not a small amount of money, it is enough to give at least 10 Patriot systems. Let me remind you, the Patriot system alone costs $1 billion. We don't need to send these systems from America. 101 Patriot systems are currently in the possession of 19 NATO member countries. If each of these countries gave one system, we could be very calm, and not a single missile would fall on Kyiv, or on the Dnieper, or on Odessa, or on Kharkiv, or any other city. This could be done. This is not the case. In addition, F-16 aircraft, you know, have been rattling for 2 years now that Ukrainian pilots have been successfully trained in Arizona, and in California they have been trained, and an aviation alliance has been created, Holland, Belgium, Denmark, Sweden, for example. And they are about to send it, and this is about to drag on for almost 3 years. And the cart is still there. 10 planes were sent. What are 10 planes? This is not enough, my friends. Today, the ratio between Russian and Ukrainian flight equipment is 5 to 1. Do you understand how it is possible to talk about the successes of the armed forces of Ukraine without ensuring the safety of the air environment? It is impossible, so the 3 components are a guarantee of success on the fronts of the war in Ukraine.
Поэтому 3 компонента являются гарантом успеха на фронтах войны в Украине.
I repeat, these are the F-16 aircraft, the Patriot anti-security system and, of course, long-range ATACMS. So, although they began to give them, but again by a teaspoon. I return to your question, who is responsible, who makes the decision? One person is Biden. He is president to this day, although he withdrew his candidacy from the claims for another term. And yet, my friends, he will remain president until January 20th of next year. It is he who answers, especially since the money has been given, permission has been given, the law has been passed, period, only he. Therefore, I touched on another issue, no less important, the attitude of European leaders to help Ukraine. The same Scholz says today, I will not send Taurus, long-range missiles to Ukraine until America gives the go-ahead. Look at the contradictory statements. Right now.
Just now, a message is also coming from European leaders. The head of EU diplomacy, José Borrell, said that lifting the ban on the use of Western weapons by Ukraine to strike at the Russian Federation could contribute to peacekeeping efforts. As if they wake up there.
First, we need to act to convince Putin that he has no future. That is, Ukraine today, tomorrow will take Kursk, and then take Belgorod, and then go further. There will be Voronezh, there will be everything you want, and Bryansk, and there you look, these 11 drones fell on Moscow. Do you think it's just like that? This is a good message to Muscovites, to those who walk the streets of Moscow today, as if nothing had happened. Nothing of the kind. They will have to pay for all this, for that blood, for those tears of the Ukrainian people. It is they who will definitely have to, and they will not go anywhere. And these first batch of drones, which fell on Moscow, in the Moscow region with a population of 21 million people. So these are only the first swallows. Let's see what happens next. And no matter how much they are cocked in Russia, sooner or later they will have to soberly approach the situation in which they find themselves. You see, how now, on the one hand, they console themselves with the fact that they allegedly have successes in the Donetsk direction. And on the other hand, they have nothing to respond to in Kursk. Please, as I said, today the armed forces of Ukraine are beginning to show active actions in 5 directions. It means something. Therefore, on the one hand, Putin is trying to cover his head, while his legs are exposed, and on the other hand, he wants to cover his legs, his head is exposed. Therefore, there is a dilemma. And in order to convince Putin that it is necessary to sit down at the negotiating table, it is necessary to show the strength of the armed forces of Ukraine even greater than it is today. And for this, it is enough to give Ukraine what it needs. And that's it, nothing else is needed. Therefore, now the armed forces of Ukraine are on the rise. This is just amazing. This gives impetus not only to the armed forces of Ukraine, but also to us, friends of Ukraine. You see, show and tell everyone, those who hesitate. Look at what the armed forces of Ukraine are capable of. Look at what things Ukraine is doing today already on the territory of Russia itself. This is very important. Today is a turning point. If we do not take advantage of this, then all our efforts will be ruined. This is the whole problem. It does not matter what intensity the pre-election struggle takes place in our country. Whoever is in the White House after November 5th will be about him too, his strategy. For Ukraine defends our national interests on distant borders. We talk about this all the time. The same is happening in the Middle East. Today, the Democrats are fighting like a fish on ice in order to end the war today. Both in Ukraine and in the Middle East, in order to announce to voters that we, Democrats, are the party of peace. That's how good we are. We ended 2 wars. It was we who did it, although they started them. It is thanks to the mediocrity and stupidity of the Democrats that these 2 wars, the most terrible, are taking place today in the world, which threaten to develop into a thermonuclear one, thanks to the Democrats. Therefore, a very important issue today is that not a single election policy of a new candidate, be it for the White House or for the lower or upper houses of Congress, will not be cut off from helping Ukraine or Israel, will not be in any way, because, I repeat, these are our national interests. Today, the war in Ukraine or in the Middle East, tomorrow, it will be with us, in our home, in one state or another. This must be understood, so it is simply outrageous, you know, it is God who gave us such a great people as Ukraine, which is behaving amazingly heroically today in relation to these barbarians. And we have no right to ignore this and push it into the background, believing that these are not our issues, these are European issues, for example, or there, Let Israel make concessions, it's time, Hamas is invincible, that we need to make some kind of donations. This is immoral, this is criminal. This is what we are trying to convey to our voters.
Today at the Pentagon or the night before, Patrick Ryder said that the United States remains with Ukraine until its victory and will help for a very long time, while he said that the Ukrainian offensive in the Kursk region is aimed at creating a buffer zone. This is what our President of Ukraine Volodymyr Zelensky said earlier. And Ryder says that's why we're having conversations to learn more about their goals. That is, as I understand it, it is true that we are not sharing our plans with our closest allies now? And if so, then perhaps because of this they do not want to give us these permits and weapons?
I think that if there is such a thing, that is, not disclosing plans for further actions of the armed forces of Ukraine, it is justified by the fact that red lines still exist. Therefore, where is the guarantee that Biden will approve, applaud Zelensky and say, "Well done, let me go with you"? There is no such guarantee. I'll take you back to the example we just talked about. Attacks on the Crimean Bridge. To this day, there is no permit. Do you understand how? The same thing today, to this day, Biden says to Zelensky, "You have no right to use, apply our long-range ATACMS on the territory of Russia." This is what Biden says to this day, to this minute. Therefore, why should Zelensky say, "Oh, you know, dear Mr. Biden, I want to do this. What do you think?" No, Zelensky is doing the right thing. It is not necessary. Do as you see fit, your shirt is closer to your body. That's it. You know, that's the whole problem, so we can't tie the hands of either Zelensky or Bibi Netanyahu today. Why? Because they are responsible to their peoples. It is them, not Biden. And Biden is thinking about his re-election or the re-election of his party. That's the only thing he thinks about, it's selfishness. And we are thinking about something else. We are thinking about the fact that today Ukraine, if we lose it, tomorrow it will be the rest of Europe and America. So, we can do business, Sir Zelensky is right, you need to act at your own discretion. At the same time, while continuing to demand the fulfillment of our promises, especially since we are indebted to Ukraine, I have said and will always say that we are indebted to Ukraine for the Budapest Memorandum that we imposed, deceived Ukraine, and then, you know, ran away into the bushes, as if we had nothing to do with it. Yes, we did. Therefore, we are obliged to return to Ukraine what we stole from Ukraine. And now we must help Ukraine, bear the losses that we have imposed on Ukraine, and we must pay for it. That's how it should be. Therefore, today is a critical moment. The Ukrainian army is on the rise, precisely on the moral rise. The spirit of the Ukrainian soldier has risen today, he must be supported. Therefore, the conscription age, which is being revised today in Ukraine with the desire to attract 18 and older to the army, it should be supported by modern American equipment, special means, so that young people understand that they will be protected, that they do not go to war with their bare hands, that we, Americans, support these young people by providing modern types of weapons. This is how it should be, otherwise there will be no success.
So far, have you heard that some very active guns will give Ukraine or something like that?
There's talk, you know, there's talk. Thank God, you know, the Republican Party does not publish many things today, it does not go to print there. In any case, there is an active effort to even supply modern types of weapons using artificial intelligence. Keep in mind, today America is learning a lot on the fronts of the war in Ukraine. A lot is being taken into account, even after mastering Russian weapons. For example, the Ukrainians are transferring this to America, and America is studying and even making adjustments to its developments that were previously made, taking into account the shortcomings of American types of weapons compared to the types of weapons that Russia uses today in Ukraine. In addition, as I told you, I repeat, we have created a center for the exchange of experience between Ukrainian soldiers and our veterans in Ageo. And then the amazing news is that it is we, American military experts, who are studying in the Ukrainian military, Ukrainian experts in this center. And Ukrainian soldiers share their ideas, their experience that they have gained over these 2.5 years in the war for their country. And now it's no secret to anyone, Ukrainian soldiers are making amazing developments. These drones that are used in Ukraine today are mostly developed by the Ukrainians themselves. Moreover, the drones are no less effective than those that we, the Americans, supply. Moreover, they are also cheaper. Do you understand? Thus, there is such a merging of our two armies, American and Ukrainian, in the field of new developments. And the use of modern American weapons in Ukraine. Although this is done with great caution, so that these types of weapons do not fall into the hands of enemies. This is, in war it should be like in war. It is necessary to give only Ukraine types of weapons so that they can feel victory in the use against enemies. There are rumors that some new types of weapons are coming to Ukraine. It is there that today there is a test site where we can test how our new developments work. And in this regard, Ukrainian soldiers engineers also make their contribution. Having tried, they accompany our American engineers with their recommendations, their advice, saying that, friends, this is not quite good, this is better, we need to stop here. This is how the two armies work today.
Boris Yakovlevich, I think we have already said that Biden is in no hurry to give permission, ATACMS, to hit the Russian Federation. Or perhaps it is being asked from the Kremlin. Are there any secret sentences between Washington and Moscow?
The fact that there is a channel connecting the White House with the Kremlin is known, and Biden and his administration have never hidden it. I'll tell you more, when Congress passed a law giving Russia the status of a sponsor of terrorism, Biden was against it. He said that we cannot do this because if we declare or give such a status to Russia, then we must break all channels of communication with Russia, that is, the ambassadors must be recalled, and our relations between the Pentagon and the Russian Ministry of Defense must be interrupted, and the special services should not communicate. This is against our interests.
Минобороны России должны быть прерваться, и спецслужбы не должны общаться. Это против наших интересов.
Why? Biden explains this by the fact that there must be some kind of channel between our departments, and we must periodically inform the same Putin that we are following, we see, we know, and that any of his movements in one direction or another, aimed, say, even at the use of non-communicative weapons, they will be stopped by us, the Americans. This is how Biden explains it. So now look. On the other hand, we know that the same Bill Burns, the director, for example, of the CIA, he periodically communicates with the same Naryshkin or with other representatives of the Russian secret services. Apparently, there are some contacts, there are some kind of communication and promises, I have no doubt about it, You don't have to be, such a super powerful specialist who has contact with insiders. It is not necessary.
Сверхмощным специалистом, имеющим контакт с инсайдерами. Не обязательно.
Here logic itself prompts. What can representatives of the White House and the Kremlin, for example, talk about behind closed doors? One thing is that Biden is on his lips. We must prevent a clash between two nuclear powers. Therefore, Biden, being indecisive, short-sighted and even a coward by nature, he could offer the same Putin in advance. If you do not use, for example, non-conventional weapons, not necessarily nuclear, chemical, bacteriological, for example, then we, in turn, will not allow the same Zelensky to use our modern types of weapons, including ATACMS with a long range on the territory of Russia.
Химическое, бактериологическое, к примеру, мы, в свою очередь, не будем позволять тому же Зеленскому применять наши современные виды вооружений, в том числе атакамсы большого радиуса действия, на территории России.
Or he will slow down the use of F-16 aircraft by the armed forces of Ukraine. This is what Putin is afraid of. He is very afraid. He is afraid of the F-16. Because the F-16 is better than any model, no matter what Su-35, Su-34, whatever you call it, the F-16 today, despite the fact that these are fourth-generation aircraft, they are inferior to fifth-generation aircraft, the F-35, for example, and even the F-22. And yet, I will tell you that Putin is afraid of them, very afraid. And Biden, in turn, says, don't worry, we will not give opportunities. But you, in turn, do not apply, do not do this, do not do this, do not do that. Of course, there is such an agreement, I have no doubt about it. Otherwise, my friends, why the hell mock the Ukrainian people? It's sadism, to see how people bleed and help with a teaspoon. They say, come on, here we give you, here are 21, here are 200 million today, tomorrow 250 million. Wait, what are you doing with 61 billion? Why was it given? You shouted at all corners that the Republicans did not give money. They gave it. 4 months have passed, my friends. What are you waiting for? End the war, provide assistance to Ukraine in full, so that Ukraine can kick out these scoundrels. And these successes of Ukraine in the Kursk direction are a stunning example of the fact that it is enough to help Ukraine a little with those modern types of weapons, an attack, for example, the destruction of the Crimean Bridge, to stop these scoundrels near Donetsk and make it possible to completely go on the counteroffensive through the use of long-range ATACMS. This is just how it compensates for the shortage of manpower of the armed forces of Ukraine. And of course, with F-16 aircraft, believe me, the war will end in 2 or 3 weeks. Putin will shout about a truce. Look, this will force Putin to sit down at the negotiating table on our terms, on Ukraine's terms. There is only one thing, the withdrawal of all the scoundrels abroad in 1991. This is the main thing. The exchange of all prisoners, of which there are already thousands on the territory of Ukraine, thank God, 1,000 times thanks to the armed forces of Ukraine, that's 2. And thirdly, then there will be a conversation about reparations, about compensation for all the losses that Ukraine has suffered. Let me remind you, according to our Institute for the Study of War in Washington, more than 1 trillion in damage has already been inflicted on Ukraine. 1.2 trillion. Here are the data of our institute. This is a disaster. This is a disaster that must be compensated. And for generations, Russians will pay for this. Generations. Just like Germany is still paying for what it did during World War II. How many generations have changed? This is exactly what awaits Russia. Sure.
Dmitry Stakhanovich Medvedev, probably, had too much with strong drinks and began to find advantages in the Kursk operation. The deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation managed to issue a second post with a reaction to what is happening in the Kursk region. And he said that everything was not so bad, and the breakthrough of the border allegedly saved Russia from the negotiation trap. In my opinion, recently, albeit theoretically, there has been one danger, a negotiation trap, where our country could fall under a certain set of circumstances. Namely, early, unnecessary negotiations with unclear prospects and consequences, Medvedev said. And now almost everyone in the Kremlin has already spoken out on the topic that there can be no negotiations with Ukraine after the Kursk operation. At the same time, The Times writes that if Putin refuses to negotiate, then the armed forces of Ukraine will advance further. What do you think Putin will do now? How will he act, and why all these statements about possible or impossible negotiations with Ukraine?
Of course, the fact that Putin will give up so easily, you don't even need to think about it. And it should not be ruled out that now Putin can abandon all the modern weapons at his disposal, I mean conventional, up to carpet bombing in the Kursk region and destroying his own people. Let me remind you of Chechnya. What did he do to the Chechen people? After all, in addition to the Chechen people, there were many peoples of other nationalities, including Russians, and they did not care about this. How many thousands of people, civilians, were killed? This is a clear example. You see, that's why to say, and even more so, he now needs to show his people how powerful they are, how strong they are. And to say, you see, I waited and waited, and now my patience is broken. They do not meet halfway, they are barbarians, they are terrorists, as soon as they are not called now, you see, we, the armed forces of Ukraine, who entered the territory of Russia. And this will be his justification for the use of a barrage, attacks, including on his own population, which still lives in the occupied, even if you want, territories of the armed forces of Ukraine. Although the armed forces of Ukraine today show a stunning example of humanism, decency in relation to the population that ended up on the territory captured by the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region. All our media pay tribute. How big is the difference in the level of civilization of these two peoples, the people of Ukraine and Russia, if you look at it by the standards of the attitude of the Ukrainian soldier to the civilian population of Russia, and vice versa, what Russian soldiers did in Bucha, Irpin, Izium, Mariupol, is it comparable? And Putin doesn't care about all this. And so we need to be prepared for the fact that Putin can use, as I said, carpet bombing, no matter what, no one, to show his people that they know how to defend their territories. You need to be ready for this. This is a message to us, the West, and America above all. We must make sure that the Ukrainian troops are ready for this, help with weapons. This is the most important thing, with the necessary weapons, and we have them.
As for the talks, that's why now in Russia, and not only in Russia, they say that, well, that's it. Now there can definitely be no agreements.
Well, what can they say, my friends? They understand perfectly well that today Ukraine has a great opportunity, firstly, to complete what they started. What does it mean to complete? Take the Kursk nuclear power plant, take it, damn it, and say, listen, you are leaving the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, and we are leaving the Kursk nuclear power plant, okay? We are leaving the Kursk region, you are leaving the Donetsk region completely, without talking, okay? We are giving up the Rostov region, we are giving up the Voronezh region, the Bryansk region, we are giving up Moscow, we will not take it, we promise you, we will not reach the Urals, please, and you are going beyond the borders of 1991. That's just so, there should be no other.
Yes, I hope that this will be the case, but something tells me that Putin is ready to give up even the Kursk region, because he is sick in the head. Boris Yakovlevich, thank you very much for this conversation, for finding time for our broadcast. I wish you a good, wonderful day. Thank you for supporting Ukraine. And I remind you that Boris Pincus was in touch with us. You, friends, support our conversation with your likes, write comments, and, of course, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you all for your attention. Good news and see you.